I walked into the living room, the door creaking behind me as I stepped through. The sketchbook, the one I had spent weeks perfecting, slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. But I didn't care about the sketchbook anymore. I barely even registered the sound. The sight before me burned through my mind like a fire. Cassandra, my fiancée, straddling another man. He was on top of her, in the middle of my living room as if it was any other day. She laughed, and the sound of it felt like a punch to my gut. The man, someone I'd never seen before, looked up in shock as I stepped forward. His eyes went wide, but he didn't move. Didn't even apologize. He just sat there frozen. Cassandra's eyes met mine a moment later. Her face went pale as she pushed the guy off, fumbling to pull herself together. Daniel, she whispered almost too softly. The word felt like the breaking of everything we had ever built. My heart thudded in my chest, but it wasn't the fast, panicked thumping you'd expect in a moment like this. No, it was a slow, heavy beat, like the pulse of an inevitable storm that had finally arrived. Don't say anything, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I didn't know how I managed it, but the quiet rage inside me was suffocating. I just want to hear you say it. I want to hear you tell me what the hell this is. Cassandra stood up from the couch, her face flushed with embarrassment, but there was something else in her eyes, something I couldn't read. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, nervously avoiding my gaze. Daniel, please? Don't give me excuses. I stepped forward, dropping the sketchbook at her feet, and she flinched slightly as though my anger was more of a shock to her than the fact that she'd just been caught in the act. The guy scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting between the two of us. I didn't know she had a fiancé, he stammered, clearly trying to justify himself. I swear, man, I didn't. I cut him off, my voice low and controlled. You knew exactly what you were doing. Daniel, stop. Cassandra took a step forward, her voice suddenly sounding more forceful. This isn't what you think. I turned to her, all the confusion and betrayal twisting inside me. Then what the hell is it, Cassandra? What is this? My voice cracked as the words finally left me, but it didn't matter. The truth was out there, hanging in the air between us like a suffocating fog. She hesitated, shaking her head, clearly struggling to find words. But she didn't look sorry. Not truly. There was no regret in her eyes. Just something cold. Something distant. I've been meeting him every Thursday. I needed something more, Daniel, she admitted, almost as if she were talking about something trivial like a missed appointment or an overdue bill. You've always been so steady. So dependable. You don't take risks. You don't live the way I want to live. I needed something exciting. My chest tightened, and for a moment I didn't know whether to scream or cry. You think this is exciting? I choked out, my hands shaking with frustration. This isn't excitement, Cassandra. This is betrayal. This is everything we had, thrown away for some thrill you couldn't find with me. Her face softened, but only slightly. She stepped closer, the same false tenderness in her voice. You're overreacting, Daniel. This wasn't about you, it was about me, about my need to feel something different. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. I felt like the floor was dropping beneath me. How long? I managed to ask, barely able to get the words out. How long has this been going on? Months. She whispered it, her eyes avoiding mine. Every Thursday. I swear, it wasn't planned this way. I just needed more. The room felt colder. I looked down at the man who had ruined everything, and he finally began to shuffle toward the door, still glancing between us. I'll go, man, he muttered, his face red with shame or guilt, I wasn't sure. Sorry for what it's worth. He left without another word, and the sound of the door closing behind him felt final. I stared at Cassandra, my hands now clenched into fists at my sides. I thought we were building a future together, I said, the words tasting like ash. But you've already destroyed it. You've set fire to everything, Cassandra. Her eyes filled with tears, but there was no real remorse in them. She was playing a role. I'm sorry, Daniel. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't think it would go this far. But you did think about it. You chose it. And you knew exactly what it would cost me, I shot back. You don't get to apologize now. Not when you've already decided you were going to live your life without me. The silence between us stretched thick and suffocating. She looked at me with pleading eyes, like she expected anything other than the cold indifference that I was feeling. But there was nothing left to say. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked toward the door, stopping only for a moment to look back at her, standing there in the living room where we had shared so many memories. The place that now felt like a tomb. Take care of yourself, Cassandra, I said quietly. I won't be here when you come to your senses. And I won't be here when you decide that you want a real life. You've already made your choice. I stepped out of the door and into the sunlight, leaving everything behind. I drove aimlessly, my knuckles white as they gripped the steering wheel. The hum of the tires on the highway was the only sound in the car, a dull drone that made everything feel even more distant. My mind wouldn't stop spinning. Cassandra's words. Her cold confession. The laughter of the man in the living room. I could still hear it faintly in the back of my head. It felt like the world had shifted on its axis and I was standing on the edge of something that couldn't be fixed. It wasn't just the affair, it was the realization that I'd been blind to everything. To her. To us. To what I had thought we were building. I didn't know where I was going or even if I cared. I just needed to be alone. The empty road stretched out before me and I followed it, letting the miles pile up, the minutes blur into hours. The car felt too small. Too suffocating. So I kept driving. Eventually, I ended up at a gas station diner on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, just a few booths, a counter, and a jukebox that played old country songs. The kind of place you stop at when you've driven too long, not caring much for anything other than the fact that it's quiet. I parked my car and went inside without thinking. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead and the smell of greasy food hit me as soon as I walked through the door. A waitress, young but with tired eyes, waved me to a seat by the window. "Coffee?" she asked, already turning toward the pot. I nodded wordlessly as I slid into the booth. The weight of everything was pressing down on me and I could feel the exhaustion creeping into my bones. As I sat there, the dull hum of the diner became a background noise to my thoughts, which only seemed to get louder. Texts from Cassandra buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't even glance at them. I knew what they said. The same thing they always said: apologies. Guilt? Begging for a second chance. I deleted them. All of them. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just the betrayal of what she had done with that guy. It was the lies. The manipulation. The way she had slowly pulled away from me without me even noticing, without me even realizing that she'd been setting the stage for this moment for months. Years, maybe? I had been the steady one. The safe one. The guy who showed up every day, did the right thing, made the right choices. And yet, that was never enough. The waitress brought me my coffee and I thanked her absent-mindedly. I stared down into the black liquid, watching the steam rise in the air. I didn't know how long I'd been sitting there. An hour? 2? Time felt warped, like it was moving in slow motion. And yet, when my phone buzzed again, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I glanced at the screen. It was Cassandra. The text read, "I'm so sorry, Daniel. Please. Let's talk. I need to explain. Please." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to call her. To hear her out. To let her explain herself, even though I knew there was no explanation that could fix what had happened. But another part of me, maybe the part that had already started to shut her out, wanted to throw the phone across the diner and walk out into the night. I hit delete. The waitress came back to check on me, but I could barely focus on her words. "You okay there?" she asked, a sympathetic tilt in her voice. I nodded slowly, unable to form the words to explain. "Yeah. Just thinking." She gave me a small smile, the kind that only people in places like this could pull off, faint but genuine. "Well, if you need anything, I'll be right over there," she said, gesturing to the counter. I muttered a thank you and watched her walk away. My phone buzzed again. Cassandra. Again. I didn't even look this time. The thought of hearing her voice was too much, too painful. Instead, I slipped my phone back into my pocket and focused on the coffee cup in front of me. I needed a decision. I needed to think about what came next. But nothing made sense. What was I supposed to do? Walk away from everything we had built together? Walk away from the life I had imagined with her? The dreams of the future? The family we talked about? I couldn't even imagine it. It felt impossible. Yet it wasn't any more impossible than staying in a relationship where one of us was lying. Where one of us was slowly killing whatever we had by not being honest. I sat back in the booth, staring at the mug in front of me. I had given so much, but none of it mattered. It hadn't mattered to her. After a few more minutes, I left the diner. The weight of the decision still sitting heavy on my chest. But something inside me had already shifted. There was no going back. No undoing the damage. And the worst part? I knew that no matter how much she begged, no matter how many apologies she sent my way, this was already over. The world had already shifted. And so had I. I didn't drive home right away. I didn't want to face the apartment where we had once talked about our future. Instead, I drove around the city for a while, the empty streets stretching ahead of me, until I found a park by the lake. I sat there in my car, watching the stillness of the water, trying to clear my mind. There was so much I needed to figure out, so much I didn't understand. But for the first time in hours, I felt a flicker of clarity. I didn't need her to define me anymore. I didn't need her approval or her promises. I had me, and I needed to start rebuilding everything from scratch. The sun was setting when I finally left the park and made my way home. But by then, I had already made my decision. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't alone anymore. Not really. When I got home, the apartment felt colder than it should. The air was thick with the unspoken words that had hung between Cassandra and me for too long. The silence felt like a trap, like the space around me had become too small for everything I was carrying inside. I pushed the door open and found her sitting on the couch. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy from crying, but there was something in her expression that told me she wasn't ready to apologize. At least not in the way I needed. She had that look, the one she always got when she knew she was about to say something that was only half true. She stood up when she saw me, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweater. "Daniel, please," she started. But I cut her off before she could go any further. "No, just don't." My voice was steady, though the storm in my chest was still raging. I couldn't look at her without seeing the image of her with him, her laughing, her body entwined with someone else's. I couldn't get it out of my head, no matter how hard I tried. She took a shaky breath, her eyes searching mine for some kind of sign, some kind of mercy. "Daniel, I know I messed up, but this isn't who I am. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please, just let me explain." Her voice wavered as she reached for me, but I stepped back, out of her reach. "Explain? You think there's anything left to explain?" I shook my head, the frustration building up inside me like a pressure cooker. "I'm not interested in your explanation, Cassandra. You were right about one thing. I'm steady. I've always been steady. But you've been playing games with me for who knows how long. You've been living a double life, and you want to act like I should just accept your apology?" She looked like I'd slapped her, but there was a flicker of anger behind her eyes. "You don't get it," she snapped, her voice rising now. "You've always been so predictable, so safe. I needed more than that, Daniel. I needed excitement. Something to remind me that I'm still alive." I stared at her, incredulous. "Excitement?" I laughed bitterly. "You think cheating on me is exciting? You think throwing away everything we had is what you needed?" My words were cutting, but I couldn't stop them from coming out. "You've destroyed everything. And for what? A thrill." She opened her mouth to say something, but I couldn't listen anymore. I couldn't hear the excuses, the justifications. "No," I said firmly. "This is over, Cassandra. I'm done." The words felt heavy, like they were carved into stone, but they were necessary. The weight of everything was finally pressing down, and I needed to make a choice for myself. Not for her, not for anyone else. Just me. Her face crumpled as the reality of it settled in. "You can't mean that. You can't just throw everything away like this." Her voice was desperate now, a tone I'd never heard from her before. She stepped forward again, her hands outstretched. "Daniel, please. I love you. I need you. Don't do this." But I could see through it. The love she claimed to have was the same love that allowed her to betray me. It was the same love that made her choose someone else over me. I wasn't buying it anymore. "You've been lying to me, Cassandra. You've been lying to yourself, too. This," I gestured between us, "this was never real for you, and it's certainly not real anymore. You can't love someone and do this to them. You can't." She flinched as my words hit her like a slap. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just done pretending that what we had was salvageable. "I'm not the one who messed this up," she said, her voice breaking. "You're so safe, Daniel. You're so reliable that I couldn't even talk to you about what I needed. I had to go somewhere else for it. But you," her voice faltered as she tried to make sense of the mess she'd created. "You were always just there. Always the same. Always perfect. Perfect." The word stung. "That's what you wanted, right?" I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "You wanted someone who'd always be there, who'd never let you down, who'd always do the right thing. But you couldn't stand it, could you? You couldn't stand the idea of having someone who actually cared about you enough to be steady. You had to ruin it." She took another step toward me, her voice barely a whisper. I was scared, she said, her words full of vulnerability. Scared of being stuck in the same place, of not feeling anything anymore. I wanted to feel alive again. And I thought maybe if I did this I could feel something. But I was wrong, Daniel. I see that now. I wanted to feel sorry for her. I wanted to be the person who comforted her and told her everything would be okay. But I couldn't. Not after what she'd done. Not after how she had chosen to betray me. You should have talked to me, I said, my voice a little softer but still firm. But you didn't. You chose to lie. And that's why this is over. Her face crumpled and she let out a shaky breath. You're really done, aren't you? I'm done. I said it with certainty this time. No hesitation. This isn't a mistake, Cassandra. It's not something that can be fixed with a conversation or a tearful apology. You've made your choice and I've made mine. For a moment she stood there, her eyes filling with tears. But she didn't argue. She didn't beg. She simply nodded slowly as if she knew that nothing she said could change my mind. And I was okay with that. With one final look at her, I turned and walked toward the door. It felt like the weight of 1,000 years had just been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how long it would take for the ache to stop. But I knew I was making the right choice. Goodbye, Cassandra, I said, not looking back. And this time I meant it. I woke up the next morning with a dull headache, the kind that only comes after too many hours spent in silence, replaying conversations, and walking around in a fog. I didn't want to go back to the apartment, but there was no avoiding it. It was my home, too. I grabbed a coffee from a drive-thru on my way back. The cold morning air was a sharp contrast to the suffocating feeling that had been with me for the past few days. As I sat at a red light, I stared out the window, lost in thought. I kept thinking about Cassandra. Her face when I told her it was over. The look of surprise, then hurt, then something else I couldn't name. She hadn't fought for me, not really. She'd fought to keep her world, her safety net, intact. And now I was no longer part of it. The thought should have felt like freedom. But instead, it felt like the aftermath of a storm. I had survived it, yes. But the wreckage was everywhere, and there was no telling how long it would take to rebuild. I turned into the apartment complex and parked. The building loomed in front of me, and for a second I didn't want to go inside. I wasn't ready to face the space where everything had unraveled. But I had no choice. I walked up the stairs, my footsteps heavier than usual. When I opened the door, the familiar smell of the place hit me, the faint scent of wood polish, the smell of her perfume that still lingered on the pillows. I didn't know how long it would take before it didn't feel like she was still here, in every corner, every inch. The apartment looked the same, of course. The books were still on the shelf. The framed picture of us on the beach still sat on the mantel. It was almost like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just completely shattered everything between us. But I knew. I stepped into the living room and froze when I saw a bag by the door. It was hers. I wasn't sure how long she'd been gone. I hadn't checked my phone. Hadn't wanted to know. But seeing the bag, half-packed, made it real in a way I wasn't ready for. I walked over to it, unzipping the top slowly. Her clothes. A few of her things. Nothing that seemed out of place, except for the emptiness of it all. The realization hit me hard. She had already started leaving. That's when my phone buzzed, and I almost didn't want to look at it. But I did. A message from her brother. Hey, man. I think we need to talk. Can you call me when you get a chance? I felt a knot twist in my stomach. What was this about? I hadn't even realized I'd been holding my breath until the message was deleted, just like the rest of them. It wasn't just Cassandra I needed to untangle myself from. It was her entire world. Her family. The people who had been in my life, too, for so long. I had let them all in without thinking twice, without ever questioning their intentions. And now I was left with nothing but questions. I dropped onto the couch, staring at the wall, wondering what the hell had happened. It was her brother, her damn brother, who I should have seen coming. He'd always been a bit too friendly, a bit too supportive. He always liked to drop by when I was away, taking the opportunity to check in with Cassandra. But I never questioned it, never even thought about it. And now here I was, feeling the sting of everything I'd ignored for so long. I called him back. The phone rang twice before he picked up. Daniel, hey. His voice was warm, but there was an edge to it. I didn't like it. I know you're probably not up for this, but we need to talk. I cleared my throat, leaning back against the couch. Talk about what? It's about Cassandra, he said, his voice dropping a little. She's not doing well, man. I just want you to know that she's struggling with everything that's happened. I clenched my jaw, already feeling the anger rising. She's struggling? I repeated, my voice tight. She's the one who made the choice. She's the one who decided to destroy everything we had. I get it, he said quickly. But look, I'm not asking you to go back to her or fix things, but I think you need to hear her side. There's more to it, Daniel. There's more than just what happened with you. The words hit me like a slap. What are you trying to say? He hesitated before speaking again. I think there's stuff she hasn't told you. About her, about everything. I just think you deserve to know the truth. I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in slowly. The truth? Was there more? I wanted to argue, to scream at him for trying to fix this, for even suggesting that I still owed her something. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. Instead, I exhaled slowly and said, I'll think about it. You're a good guy, Daniel. Don't let her screw you up, man. His voice softened. She's got a lot to work through, but so do you. Don't let her pull you back into her mess. Please. I didn't respond right away. What was there to say? I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. What she wanted didn't matter to me anymore. But I couldn't lie. The idea of hearing her side of things, of knowing everything she'd kept from me, that was tempting. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't even about closure. I think, in some sick way, I just needed to understand what the hell had happened. I'll be in touch, I said finally, hanging up the phone. I stood up, pacing the room for a few moments before heading to the kitchen, opening the fridge. There was nothing in there except half-empty bottles of wine and old takeout. I grabbed a bottle and sat at the counter, staring at it, wondering when things would start making sense. The world didn't feel any clearer. Not yet. I took a long swig from the bottle, and for the first time in days, the tension in my chest eased. Maybe it wasn't the right way to deal with things, but it was the only way I knew how. And as I sat there, alone, the gravity of it all started to hit. This wasn't just about Cassandra anymore. It was about me too. About who I was now, who I'd become after everything had fallen apart. I didn't have the answers. Not yet. But I was beginning to see that the answers didn't matter as much as the question. What was I going to do now? The thought hung there unanswered. I wasn't sure, but I would find out. And it would start with me. The days stretched on in a blur. I avoided the apartment for most of the week, opting to spend my time at the office, burying myself in blueprints and design plans. It was the only thing that didn't feel broken. The only thing that still made sense. But even then, I found my mind wandering back to her, Cassandra, and the mess she'd left behind. Then, one evening, a message came through on my phone. It was a notification from Instagram. It was a new post from Cassandra. I stared at it for a moment before opening the app. It was a picture of her and the guy from the living room, the one I hadn't even bothered to ask about, smiling wide in a bright sunny place. A beach, probably somewhere tropical. The kind of vacation that cost more than I ever made in a month. The caption read, "Sometimes you just have to let go and live authentically. Life's too short to stay in your comfort zone. Feeling free, feeling alive. Hashtag authentic love, hashtag new beginnings." I stared at it for what felt like forever, my finger hovering over the screen. It was like she was trying to rewrite the story, trying to make this look like a new chapter. Trying to make it seem like it wasn't an affair or a betrayal, but some kind of poetic journey to freedom. I felt sick to my stomach. She had made her choice, and now she was flaunting it. The image was so perfect. The carefree smiles, the beach, the hashtags. Like she'd somehow managed to turn all of it into something that was mine to regret. And in that moment, I realized something. Something that felt as solid and real as the ground beneath my feet. I wasn't angry anymore. No, I wasn't even sad. I felt nothing. I wasn't part of her life anymore, and I was done letting her decisions define mine. I took a deep breath and scrolled past the post, not looking back at it. But then another thought came to me. If she could make a statement about her life, if she could move on as easily as she was acting like she had, then why the hell couldn't I? Why was I letting her be the one to call the shots? I stood up from my desk and walked over to the window. The city spread out before me in all its concrete glory, bustling with the noise of late afternoon traffic. But all I could hear was the sound of my own thoughts, louder now than the quiet hum of the office. I needed to take control back. My life back. I pulled my phone out again, and this time, I opened the Instagram app with a newfound sense of purpose. I typed out a short, simple post. A picture of me, taken on the balcony of the office, looking down at the city. The caption read, "Sometimes it takes losing everything to find yourself. Here's to new beginnings. Hashtag on me own hashtag moving forward." I hit post and watched as the image went live. There was a strange satisfaction in it, a sense of finality. It wasn't a revenge post, at least not in the way I'd imagined. It wasn't about throwing my pain back in her face. No, it was about reclaiming something for myself that she could never take away. My peace, my strength. I wasn't going to be the one who stayed in the background anymore. I wasn't going to let her narrative dominate my life. Not anymore. It wasn't about proving something to her or anyone else. It was about me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than anger or grief. I felt clarity. The next few days passed in a blur of work and solitude. I avoided any further contact with Cassandra. I wasn't ready for the emotional toll that would come with another conversation. Not yet. Instead, I focused on the things that grounded me. My work, my friends, and even a few quiet nights out at the local bar, just to remind myself that I didn't have to do this alone. But there was one thing I hadn't expected. A few days after my post, I got a message. It was from a friend I hadn't talked to in a while, just a brief text asking if I'd seen Cassandra's latest post. They added a link to it, and I opened it hesitantly, already bracing myself for the pain it would bring. But as I read through her words, my stomach twisted into knots. It wasn't just the affair anymore. No, it was a full-blown performance now. She was painting herself as the hero of her own story, making it sound like everything that happened with us had been a product of my lack of excitement and her own desperate search for meaning. She didn't just want to move on. She wanted to rewrite everything, to make it seem like she was liberated and I was the one who'd kept her trapped in a cage of stability. It was hard to believe she could twist the truth that much. But I couldn't let it affect me. I couldn't let her define my story. Not anymore. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading her words over and over. Then, after a long breath, I set the phone down and stared out the window again, watching the world go by. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. I'd done the right thing by stepping away. I knew that now, deep down. But what struck me was how much more I could still do. How much more life I had yet to live, waiting for me just beyond the horizon. That night, I deleted the Instagram post about the new beginnings. It wasn't about showing the world how perfect I was, how much better I was without her. It was just another attempt at closure. I didn't need it. I had already closed that chapter. Instead, I set a new goal for myself. I found a new project at work, something I had been avoiding for too long, and I threw myself into it. I'd rebuild. I'd move forward not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. No more pretending. No more looking back. I closed my laptop, grabbed my jacket, and stepped outside into the cool night air, ready to embrace whatever came next. I didn't need Cassandra's approval. I had my own life to live now, and I was finally ready to start living it for myself. Weeks had passed since I made my decision. Time felt like it was slipping through my fingers, each day blending into the next. But there was one thing that had become clear to me. I was stronger than I had thought. I had gone from being a guy who just reacted to everything life threw at him, to someone who was starting to shape his own narrative. I'd been hitting the gym regularly, trying to keep my head clear and my body busy. I didn't have a routine before all this, just sporadic attempts at staying in shape. But now it was more than just exercise. It was a way to push through the emotional weight that seemed to cling to me no matter how much I tried to shake it off. I had just finished my workout, sweat dripping down my back as I grabbed my towel and wiped my face. I'd been losing myself in the rhythm of lifting and cardio, trying to find peace in the silence of the gym when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Daniel." I froze. I knew that voice. I turned slowly, and there she was. Cassandra. Standing at the entrance to the gym, her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, looking as if she hadn't missed a day of exercise in her life. Cassandra, I said flatly, my tone colder than I intended. I couldn't help it. Seeing her standing there, looking like everything was fine, like she was fine, made my skin crawl. Can we talk? She asked, taking a tentative step toward me. I wanted to tell her to leave, to get out of my space and let me live my damn life in peace. But instead, I just stood there, looking at her, feeling every ounce of the hurt and betrayal flood back into me. You shouldn't be here, I said, my voice strained. She took another step forward, her eyes filled with a mixture of desperation and something I couldn't quite place. Daniel, please? Just hear me out, okay? I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But I can't just let you go like this. You mean too much to me. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. You don't get to do this, Cassandra. You don't get to waltz in and pretend like everything can be fixed with a conversation. I'm not pretending, she said quickly, her voice cracking. I'm not. I know I've messed up. I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry for everything I did. For hurting you, for lying to you, she choked on the words, her voice faltering. I stood there, numb, watching her struggle to get the words out. I could see it, the act. She wasn't really sorry. She wasn't really asking for forgiveness. She was just trying to manipulate me back into her orbit. And I wasn't falling for it anymore. You're not sorry, I said, my voice firm. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry that I finally stopped being the safe guy you could manipulate and use for your own pleasure. But you're not sorry for what you did to me. You're not sorry that you destroyed everything. Her face flushed with humiliation, but she kept going. That's not fair. You don't understand, Daniel. I didn't know how to talk to you. You were so steady, so reliable, that I didn't know how to tell you that I needed something more. I thought I needed excitement, something new. But I was wrong. Her eyes welled with tears, and I felt the weight of her gaze on me, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. No, I said quietly, you were selfish. You put yourself first. You put your needs first and used me as a stepping stone for your own pleasure. You didn't think about how it would affect me. You didn't care. I did care, she whispered, shaking her head. I loved you, Daniel. I still do. But I wasn't happy. And I stepped back, holding my hands up. Stop. Just stop. You don't get to come in here and act like you're the victim in all this. You chose to cheat on me. You chose him over me. And now you want me to believe that you love me, that you regret it? You don't even know what you're saying, Cassandra. You don't even understand the damage you've done. Her face crumpled and she sank down onto a nearby bench, her hands shaking. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought maybe I could fix things, but now I know I can't. I know I've lost you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was too tired. Too exhausted from the lies, from the pain she had caused, and from the way she was still trying to twist this into something that wasn't her fault. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with unshed tears. I'll do anything, Daniel. Anything. Just please don't walk away. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman I had loved. The woman who had crushed me in the blink of an eye. And I realized as I stood there that I didn't owe her anything. I didn't owe her my time, my energy, or any more of my heart. I had given her everything and she had thrown it away. And now it was time for me to walk away. I think you need to leave, I said, my voice calm but final. I'm done. I don't want anything from you anymore. And I don't want you in my life. I turned and walked toward the exit, my footsteps echoing in the silent gym, leaving her behind in the space we once shared. And as I pushed open the door, the cool night air hit me like a fresh breath. I wasn't looking back anymore. I had let go. And I wasn't going to let her pull me back in. Not now. Not ever again. The following days passed slowly, each one a step further from the chaos of my past life with Cassandra. I had begun to feel like I was reclaiming something vital I had forgotten, my sense of self. It wasn't easy, and the pain was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but I could feel the weight of it lifting, little by little. I was at work when the email arrived. The subject line read simply, Cassandra's apology. My stomach tightened at the sight of her name, but I clicked it open anyway. It was long, too long, and as I read her words I felt a strange detachment, like I wasn't reading them with the emotional weight I had once attached to anything she said. She was sorry, of course. Sorry for everything. Sorry for the affair, for the lies, for not telling me what she needed. She claimed she had been running from herself, punishing me for things I hadn't even done. It was the same song and dance. I was too steady, too predictable, too safe for her. But then came the twist. In the final paragraph, she wrote, I ran from myself, Daniel, but in doing so, I ran from the only person who ever really saw me. I've hurt you beyond repair, and I can't take back the damage I've done. But I need you to know that in my heart, you were always the one I should have chosen. The words hung in the air, each one echoing like a bell that no longer had a purpose. I stared at the screen for a moment, the weight of her apology sinking in, and then, nothing. It didn't feel like closure. It didn't feel like anything. I hit delete, and then I stared at the blank screen. For a moment, I considered what I could have said to her. I could have responded, telling her I'd forgiven her or offering some words of consolation. But I didn't need to. The truth was I had already let go. She didn't need me to tell her that. She needed to understand it herself. I closed my laptop and stood up, stretching my arms above my head, letting the stillness of the office wash over me. There was a quiet that had settled in my life, one I hadn't realized I had been missing. I could feel the shift inside me, the one that happened when you stop waiting for someone else to define your worth and start defining it for yourself. My phone buzzed on the desk. Another text from Cassandra. I hesitated, then swiped it open. I understand if you never want to speak to me again. I know I lost you, Daniel, and I can't take that back. But please know that I will always care about you. I'll never stop regretting what I did. It was her final attempt to reach out, but there was nothing left in me to respond with. I didn't need her words anymore. I didn't need her regret. She had made her choices. I had made mine. I blocked her number and set my phone face down on the desk. It was strange how calm I felt. I had expected this to be harder. I thought it would sting more, drag on longer, but it didn't. It was like I had shed a skin, and now there was nothing left of the person I used to be with her. I stepped away from the desk, heading to the window. Outside, the city was bustling, just like it always had been. The noise of the world seemed distant, though, as I watched the sunset, the sky burning with shades of orange and purple. I wasn't just watching the city anymore. I was part of it. I was alive. And I was moving forward. A few days later, I found myself sitting at a quiet cafe, a book in hand and a latte on the table in front of me. I'd stopped here on a whim, taking a moment to breathe and just exist. It had become my ritual these days, a way to remind myself that life was moving, that I was moving with it. As I sipped the coffee, I felt the warmth in my chest spread. Not from the drink, but from something deeper. It was the sense that everything was finally coming together. Slowly, steadily. A woman at a table across the room caught my eye. She was reading, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her face, the sunlight catching her features in a way that made her look almost ethereal. She smiled at something in her book, her lips curling up at the edges. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel, hope. I didn't know her. I didn't know her story, her past, or her struggles. But as I sat there, watching the world move on around me, I realized that I was moving on, too. For the first time, I wasn't just existing, I was living. I was ready for whatever came next, for whatever the future held. And, for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid anymore. I finished my coffee, smiled to myself, and walked out the door into the world that was waiting for me, ready to make it mine.